Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. I'm very excited now that we're about a year into the podcast to have finally gotten the genius Bill Eddy involved in being a guest here. Welcome. So he is like an author that so many people will have heard of. He has written more than 20 books, including a wonderful co-parenting communication strategy called BIFF. So welcome, Bill. Thanks so much for doing this with me.
Thanks so much, Krista. Glad to be on.
So today as we prep for this, we've talked about doing 3 different podcasts, at least, maybe more in the future, so that we enjoy enough information from you on each topic rather than trying to cram it into one. So we are in the future going to be talking about things like how should co-parents or a parent talk to court professionals and approach communication in court, something that we know is a really big problem, especially in this highly emotional situation in which people find themselves. Then we will do another one on talking to children. How should parents talk to children? But today we are going to squarely focus on BIFF. So let's start by, Bill, tell me a little bit so that listeners know just a little who you are and a little bit about how you came to create this program called BIFF.
Okay, great. So my background's kind of comes from 3 places. So first, I became a licensed clinical social worker, did child and family counseling for a dozen years. Then I really liked conflict resolution. I'd worked as a volunteer at a mediation center, and I thought, I want to do more with this. And that lawyers were doing mediation. So I figured I'll go to law school, but I won't practice law, I'll practice mediation. So I went to law school and figured, well, for 2 years, I'll practice family law just to be familiar with it for my mediations. That turned into 15 years.
Oh, boy.
So because my counseling background was so useful in family court, dealing with substance abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, parental alienation, depression, just all of these things. And so I did that. And then I just did do mediation for 15 years after that. So you're basically looking at 3 careers that put together got me into the high conflict business, because there's a lot to teach people from each career that the other career didn't know about.
So, okay, so let's go through the other questions that people should be
Right. So the first 4 are the brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
asking.
Then the next 3, first is does it have any advice? We call this the 3 A's. Does it have any advice? Advice isn't good to give. When you've gotten a hostile email, they're not looking for your advice. Just leave that out. And you know who's most tempted to give advice is young adults, like in their 20s, and college students, 18 to 28, let's say, and their parents. And their parents say, Johnny, I don't think that Mary's going to be good for you. You may want to keep looking. And Johnny writes back, Mom, I think you need to get off my back. Let me give you some advice, Mom. And I've consulted on those cases, and that's where advice often comes in. So leave out the advice.
Okay.
The next A is admonishments, where you talk down to somebody.
Is this number 6 then? Number 6 would be admonishment.
Let's see, 5. Yeah, 6 is
Okay.
admonishments.
Okay.
It's like you should know better than to do that. And I think I'm trying to look at what Carlos wrote. I think he's got some admonishments in here.
Well, he's
Yeah.
like, you got sick at your house and
Yeah,
those things.
you've been irresponsible about self-care. That's admonishment.
Mhm.
And then the third A is no apologies. Now, this catches people by surprise because apologies most of the time are a good thing. But when you're dealing with somebody angry at you, especially if it's a high conflict divorce, your apology becomes ammunition to use against you and against you in court. See, he said he's sorry, so he admits it's all his fault. Well, I didn't admit it's all my fault. I just said there was this little mistake. But they interpret it as it's all your fault.
That makes sense.
So you don't want to feed them that. So I'd try to leave out things with the word sorry. Um,
Okay.
but if there was a problem, you can say, I'm addressing this in the future. So rather than saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to address this differently in the future.
I want to talk a little bit about just high conflict personalities theory, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because I'm sitting here thinking like this all sounds so ridiculous. Like, I mean, it shouldn't be, but it is. I mean, you worked as a family law attorney for 15 years. You've been right in the depth of all these different types of career intersections about how hard this is. And anyone listening to this, maybe who's thinking about divorce, or I mean, good for you if you've got somebody who you communicate with. That's wonderful that you communicate with well. But this really is not an overstatement to say that if you can get this little thing right, it will have big impact, right? It's
Yes.
just so much of this, like I've had Michael Saini on. I know I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Saini's work about trust building, and this learning to communicate better is so vitally important to the outcome for your children. So I don't want to
Right.
underestimate how big this seemingly little topic is.
Absolutely. Yeah. See, that's why I think it really does change how you think about the other person, which influences how you can think about yourself. How can I, and it makes things more peaceful. I mean, people, I can't tell you, well, people say, I'm so stressed by this email I just got. And oh, here's another tip. Let me throw this in here.
Mhm.
You get a hostile email, is go through it and turn it into a BIFF before you respond to it.
Mm.
And so, like that example I gave, 10 sentences saying you're a jerk, irresponsible, all this stuff. And what time is the school play on Thursday? And besides that, you never get them there on time and you always do everything wrong. You cross everything out and you say, oh, yeah, there's a question in there. And then you send your responses, say, thanks for asking me about the school play. It's at 2 o'clock on Thursday in the school gym or wherever.
That's such a smart tip.
Yeah.
That's a really good way of doing it.
I have to give credit to one of the co-authors, Kevin Chafin,
Uh-huh.
with the book. We had three. So myself, a family lawyer, Annette Burns, and a family counselor, Kevin Chafin. I'm both a family lawyer and a family counselor, but put together.
Let's talk about high conflict people. Like, what do people need to know about themselves when they're in a divorce or co-parenting situation like this
Yeah.
that is making them maybe act this way? They just
Well,
can't help it sometimes. They just go, "Oh, I can't help it," even though I'm like a reasonable person in other parts of my life.
yeah. Well, there's different levels. So I think of high conflict people as having four main characteristics. One is preoccupied with blaming others and not taking responsibility themselves. It's all other people's fault. Second is a lot of all or nothing thinking, like in terms of solutions. It's my way or the highway, buddy. You better do what I say. Third is unmanaged emotions. Now, for some people, it's obvious. For other people, it's driving them inside. They look reasonable on the surface, but their goal is revenge or their goal is some kind of punishment or getting money out of the other person or something. It's really emotional decision making. And that's not real healthy either, especially for relationships. And then the fourth is extreme behaviors that maybe 90% of people would never do, because we figure about 10% of people are high conflict people and have this pattern, and about 90% don't. But some of the 90% overreact to high conflict people and look like they're high conflict people too. And we see that in a lot of relationships.
So, when you're talking about the 10% versus the 90%, is the 10%, does that skew into a different proportion in divorce, or is that divorce statistics?
I think I think it's probably 20% of divorces, and that's your high conflict divorces, which a lot of people will say is about 20%.
That
Now,
should be a little bit encouraging to people if they're just like, not everybody has to have a high conflict divorce.
no, most people don't.
It
Most
also
people,
depends whether you hire a high conflict lawyer. Again, just saying.
it, often a high conflict lawyer will make it worse, not better. Yep. And that's what I call a negative advocate. Is
Mhm.
this could be family members, friends, coworkers that agree with you that the other person's a jerk and they're always talking them up or down, and they're not helping, they're adding to the problem.